A definition for those interested of reliability in a manufacturing plant that I prefer is the ability of a manufacturing plant to safely deliver the maximum quality product on time, in full, at the lowest sustainable cost. So I use that as my go-to for when I have a need for defining reliability. Now, the simplicity in my mind, and sometimes I make it black and white when there's a lot of gray. But simply to me, reliability equals proaction, and proaction equals no surprises. So that I see the world through a prism of proaction as to I don't want to get better at fixing things. I want to get better. I want to understand why I'm having so much practice fixing things. I shouldn't be doing that. For the purposes of this presentation, I want to intellectually agree that facilities that focused on the most important issues and that proact to prevent surprises and deviations from effective operations will be most likely to turn in superior results. I mean, that's a hard one to argue against, but we all have unity and purpose, and that's really where I want to drive this session today. So here I am 8 years later, and in my horrible PowerPoint graphics here, but I'm still in the fog. Because I live in this world of reliability engineering, and now I've spent 8 years in human performance and the other cold topics. And I still see a lot of confusion, at least in my own mind, between how they interrelate. So really, this presentation is going to focus around what is reliability and what is HPI and what do they have in common and what don't they have in common. So I started learning all these new acronyms, and for those of you who have been around a long time, back in 2016, it was called HPRCT, which is Human Performance, Root Cause, and Trending. Until the rebranding, which Jessica masterfully handled in the transition, we had some new acronyms. We have the HRO, High Reliability Organizing or Organizations, Human and Organizational Performance, Human Performance Improvement, Resilience Engineering, and these others. And of course, root cause analysis, which I'm most familiar. But I realized that I've been here 8 years, and I don't know where one of these starts and one of these ends. I just recognize that there's a lot of overlap. I sit in a lot of presentations over the past 8 years, and I hear a lot of overlap, and I hear people characterize these differently. And a lot of that is, there's a lot of people in this space now, and you have to have a commercial uniqueness. I know how the marketing world goes, as I had my own company for 37 years. But I'm sitting on the outside, and I'm saying, well, where does operational reliability fit? And then I realized that I'm thinking what reliability means to me is very different than what reliability means in the acronym of High Reliability Organizing. So I needed to come to terms, literally, on how do these work with each other? Because I know from a principle standpoint, these things all work together. Okay, where does failure come from? This is a slide. If you ever listened to me before, you're going to be ad nauseum tired of listening to it and seeing it. But this is one that clears up a lot for me, is that where does failure come from? These represent our systems, our organizational or management systems. When these systems have holes in the cheese, they provide people inadequate, insufficient, or non-existent information. Okay, these are the decision makers. So they have to trigger a decision. They have to make a decision that triggers other things to happen. When they make a decision, It comes out of their head now, and now they are taking an action or choosing not to, and they are triggering a series of cause and effect relationships that the key here is they are observable. Okay, I can see these things now. I can't see why people reason. I can't see how they do that in their head, but once it's out of their head, I can see the consequences of that decision. Now, this blue arrow here represents those thresholds of a trigger I was telling you about. That if we don't break these chains through the preventive and predictive maintenance and inspections, then we're going to have an undesirable outcome and suits are going to show up. Now, I like to make the point here that when we do break the chain, it often becomes a decision as to whether we do an RCA or not, because the consequence didn't happen, right? We got lucky. To me, a near miss is we got lucky. So now the consequences, what we want to be able to say is, well, if I'm really busy, I don't have time to do the RCA. So if that's the attitude, then what we have to just understand is everything that led up to that point of getting lucky is still there. The system is still geared that this will happen again, and you might not be so lucky next time. All right, for labeling sake, I call these latent root causes of these organizational and management systems. I call the decision error itself, the act of making the decision, a human root, and that the consequences of that decision, the immediate consequences, as physical. Okay? Now, this is what I want to stick in people's mind as to the hourglass. I call it the hourglass approach. And I want you to realize that the yellow up here represents the physics of failure. This is all the mechanical stuff and the stuff that people believe that reliability only deals with is the physics of failure. The H is the human, the decision, and that in the blue, this is all the human stuff. This is all the social sciences. This is all the physical sciences. A lot of people who do RCA focus on the decision outcome, and that becomes a problem because that's where I'm starting to look at blame. But if you're doing a decision RCA on decision outcome, then we're just focusing on shallow cause analysis. We're not doing root cause analysis. Unless you're interested in understanding decision intent, we're not doing root cause analysis, at least per our standards. So using some more terms that I'm learning in the CHOLE community is that the yellow really represents the mechanistic systems and that the blue represents the adaptive systems. Okay, here I'm trying to, I can't see which one here because it's covered up by my panel here. Blame fixes nothing. So if we stop here and we blame somebody, you're missing all of the reasons, the reasoning for the decision. Context drives behavior because I want to be able to focus on understanding why the decision at the time made sense. This is the sense making. Complex versus complicated. This is going to be my reality check. This is my hourglass that I was telling you about. If you stop short and you only look at broken parts, that's a shallow cause analysis versus a root cause analysis. The reality is in my world is that I deal with what I can control. All right, what do I learn from HPI and my whole CHOLE thing? Is say that we're all in the business of asking better questions. And that's really what I have learned the most from my 8 years with CHOLE, is that I used to question, and in hindsight I see this, I used to question like I was in a interrogation, and it wasn't a conversation. And I've learned how to be more subtle in my questioning, that when we get to that, remember, talk physical, human, and latent. When we get to that human, and we're questioning people, we're not saying, you were trained, you had the right procedure, and you still didn't do it right. What's wrong with you? That type of attitude. Is that I now have learned from you guys one of the key things is I start off with, what would right look like? On that day that this happened, what would right look like? And I can tell from that answer whether they knew the correct system or not, and be able to take my questioning on from there as to, they didn't know what right looked like. They've been doing wrong successfully for a long time without incident. Were there any surprises to you that day? Was there anything anomalous? Tell me about the times you've had to deviate from procedures and why. Because if I have to build a shortcut, that's a hole in the Swiss cheese of the system. So this questioning has been very helpful for me. Okay, and that's I think that we have unity and purpose when it comes to that.